Forgive Me Father 2 is the sequel to one of the more unique indie shooters of the past few years. If you missed the first game, it was this gritty, fast-paced, horror-themed FPS that combined old-school shooter mechanics with Lovecraftian vibes and a bold comic book art style. Now the sequel is here and it promises a lot of changes. But does it actually improve on the original, or did it lose the plot somewhere along the way? Let's talk about it. Let's start with the core of any FPS, how it plays. Forgive Me Father 2 is still very much in that boomer shooter category. Think Doom, Quake, Dusk, Ultra Kill, you know the vibe. No regenerating health, no cover system, just raw kinetic movement and combat. The good news is, the gunplay is solid, it's fast, it's fluid, and it really leans into the chaos. Movement feels great, you're constantly dashing, bunny hopping, sliding around enemies. You're encouraged to keep moving at all times, which creates this constant adrenaline rush during bigger fights. The enemy design supports that too. You're not just fighting bullet sponges, you're fighting mobs. There are tons of enemy types with different movement patterns and attacks, and they're usually thrown at you in waves, so your positioning, your weapon choice, and how you manage your cooldowns or abilities, those all matter. Now let's talk weapons. The arsenal here has definitely been expanded and tweaked compared to the first game. Each weapon feels weighty and has a unique role. You've got your standard pistols, shotguns, a fish, or even or an actual. The first game had a lot of creative and esoteric weapons, and they went all out for the sequel. In the sequel, they are even more cursed. They're all wildly different from each other, and while you can focus on the more normal weapons in the roster, why would you? The fish is the strongest weapon in the game. The biggest difference from the original game is the way you unlock them. Instead of evolving your weapons in a more linear way, you can find collectibles, either hidden or by completing levels, and use them to unlock whatever weapon looks interesting to you. You only need to find the basic weapon variant of each weapon type to unlock the other 3 variants. The way I see it, this is a direct upgrade from the original weapon system. You could very quickly unlock whatever weapons you think would fit your playstyle best, and with any extra points you can then unlock different weapons to experiment with. The only downside is that if you unlock a weapon and realize you are not vibing with it, you need to quit the level you're currently on and change your loadout in the asylum. I'll get to that in a moment. A more substantial overhaul was also done to the abilities. Now you have 3 slots that you can fill in with 3 cards. 2 for passive boosts and 1 for an ability that can be triggered once you kill enough enemies. Initially it looks like you have a lot of options, but the more of them you unlock, the more you'll see how situational most of them are. Small boost to shotgun damage, more ammo to all weapons, longer flashlight duration, that sort of thing. The abilities are a bit more experimental. They range from increased fire rate, invulnerability for a short period of time, damage to enemies you're looking at, getting back health when dealing damage, the list goes on. They are varied enough for you to find a favorite, but I personally found that as the game went on and began throwing bigger and bigger waves of enemies at you, I was forced to use the ability more and more as a way of simply surviving. In the later stages of the game you have no chance of escaping an encounter without getting hit, so abilities like draining health from enemies became must-have. Because of this, I find this new system to be less about finding what fits your playstyle, but rather experimenting until you find a build that helps you survive. Let's talk level design. The level design is a bit of a mixed bag. There are some truly standout areas in this game, levels that are visually striking and fun to navigate. You've got abandoned asylums, grim cities, weird, dreamlike spaces that warp as you explore them. There's a lot more variety this time around. The layout tends to be more open than in the first game, with more verticality and more secrets tucked away. If you like hunting for hidden rooms, lore notes, and bonus items, there's stuff here for you. That said, it feels like there is a pattern with games releasing in early access that are structured in acts. The last act always feels the weakest in terms of quality. The first game also had this issue, but I feel the sequel's third act is much worse. From way too many damn levers to confusing layouts and extremely dark, tight corridors, this act is full of questionable design choices. I found myself wanting to get over it in just about every level. The performance was also especially poor in some places. And don't even get me started on the flashlight. Fine, I'll start. It's one of the worst features in the game since it's required to be used in certain areas and you have to constantly crank it to power it. There is a skill that increases its battery, but realistically you would never pick that when you have other options. I get darkness being a main element of the game, but I don't think this was a good way of handling it. A quick note on the bosses, as each act has one at the end. They are extremely easy. For most of them, circle strafing and constantly jumping was enough to ignore most attacks. Visually, the game is absolutely striking. It keeps that hand-drawn comic book look, but it's more detailed and more grotesque this time around. The enemy designs are weirder, the color palette is more intense, and the lighting effects do a lot of heavy lifting and is where the biggest upgrade can be seen. The performance isn't excellent though, especially in areas with a lot of crazy effects, so keep that in mind. With a 4070 I had quite a few drops in places. Sound design also deserves a shout out. Guns have great audio feedback, enemy screeches are genuinely unsettling and distinctive, and the soundtrack is a killer mix of heavy riffs and eerie, ambient tracks. It amps up the tension when it needs to and kicks in hard during major combat moments. So what about the story? I know it might sound weird, talking about the story in a boomer shooter, but the game does feel like it tries to focus a bit more on the plot side of things, but in my opinion it doesn't really succeed. The setup is quite good. You are playing as the priest now, the reporter is nowhere to be seen, after the events of the first game, locked up in an insane asylum with a strange voice in his head. Each level is more or less part of his past, and there are way more notes this time around, from letters to news clippings. You even have certain choices at the end of each chapter, but they only change a couple of cutscenes. The priest and the voice converse often during the gameplay, but for the most part, there isn't anything worthwhile there.
Something terrible is gonna take place here. This place, everything about it seems evil, as if nature itself is rejecting it.
You just kill cultist and interdimensional beings. Should be enough to get you going. So where does that leave us? Forgive Me Father 2 is essentially more of the same compared to the first one. It improves in some places, but only iterates in others. And it still has some issues with the pacing of the later levels and some performance hiccups that can be otherwise improved by fiddling with the graphics options. Still, it sports some unique weapons and wonderfully varied environments that keep things interesting for the 8 to 9 hours it takes to finish a playthrough. If you are a fan of boomer shooters and you find a good deal on it, I wouldn't hesitate. Thanks for watching. If you've played the game, let me know what you thought down in the comments. Did the story make sense? Or were you just along for the ride? And how much time did you waste in that godforsaken desert temple?